I counted 55 Jedi survivors of Order 66, 40 of which were not inducted into the Inquisitors. But before we start, did you know that less than 1% of you viewers are subscribed to me? And that is just disgusting. Of you. Anyway, I do want to get something out of the way very quickly. A criticism I see a lot is that Order 66 is becoming less and less effective the more Disney Star Wars uses it, because we are getting so many Jedi that survived the Purge. So I thought I'd present you all with a simple statistic. 10,000 Jedi existed before the end of the Clone Wars, and if only 55 survived, that leaves 0.55% remaining, which means not even 1% of the Order was left. A decade after Order 66, about 20 of those fugitives are remaining, and that's me being generous because I'm including characters that defected from the Inquisitors and undetermined fates like Cal Kestis, so that number may be even lower, and it's probably closer to 12, which means that the Empire eradicated 99.88% of the Jedi Order 10 years into their rule. I'd argue they did a pretty damn good job. Also, there's a dispute of people getting mad at, oh, why didn't the Jedi help Luke in the originals? Why couldn't they train Luke instead of Yoda? Well, the only Jedi left aside from Yoda by the time of The Empire Strikes Back that could help train Luke, and we know for certain are alive, include Grogu, the literal child, Baylan Skoll, the exiled mercenary who despises Jedi and couldn't even help if he wanted to, Mill and Vivert, who were also mercenaries laying low and didn't care about the war, Nachmed, a recluse who condemned himself from leaving his planet to protect those he loved, and Maruk, who, say it with me, was a mercenary. And also a fart. It's safe to say Luke doesn't have the best options to choose from aside from Yoda. The only one that could reasonably help is Ahsoka, and it's a valid criticism to ask where she was during the war, but Dave Filoni has stated that he does have a story for how these two meet, and I want to hold off my criticisms to see how that story is going to go, and there may be a logical explanation as to where Ahsoka was during this time. First, we're going to go through the Jedi that either stayed faithful to the Order up until the very end, or were targets of the Empire. Obi-Wan Kenobi was stationed on Utapau when Order 66 took place, but he escaped and fought his fallen apprentice Anakin Skywalker to try and prevent the Empire's rise. Anakin survived and continued to terrorize the galaxy as Darth Vader, but Obi-Wan went into hiding with Anakin's son Luke, making sure the Empire would never find him. Nearly a decade later, Obi-Wan was pulled back into the fight when Leia, Anakin's other child, was kidnapped. Obi-Wan rescued her and encountered Darth Vader once again, who he defeated a second time. 7 years after that, Obi-Wan was pursued by Darth Maul, who was quickly dispatched by the Wise Master. And 2 years later, Obi-Wan would take Luke on a journey to fight the Empire, and reunited with Vader a third time, but sacrificed himself so Luke could escape. He would live on as a Force spirit to guide Luke up until the end of the war. Grandmaster Yoda was stationed on Kashyyyk during Order 66, where he would escape thanks to the help of the Wookiees and confronted Emperor Palpatine in an attempt to stop the Empire's rise to power. Yoda failed and was forced into exile, but would go on to mentor Luke Skywalker over 20 years later. Yoda would pass away peacefully at the ripe age of 900, but lived on as a Force ghost. Ahsoka Tano was a former Jedi apprenticed by Anakin Skywalker. She was expelled from the Order due to false allegations of bombing the Jedi Temple and lost faith in the Order for abandoning her. She would soon become a Mandalorian loyalist and with the help of her former clone Legion and Captain Rex, would retake Mandalore from Darth Maul. However, shortly after the siege, Order 66 took place, resulting in Maul's escape and every clone except for Rex being killed. Ahsoka would go on to assist anyone oppressed by the Empire, including Jedi fugitives, and even reunited with her fallen master, although that reunion resulted in a heartbreaking duel. She survived and outlived Darth Vader, as well as the Empire, eventually meeting Luke Skywalker and getting an apprentice of her own, Mandalorian Sabine Wren. She and Ahsoka are currently stranded in another galaxy, but they'll probably be back in no time. Kelleran Beq, also known as the Saber Hand, was a legendary swordsman who helped the Jedi infant Grogu escape Order 66. His fate is unknown, but Grogu outlived the Empire and somehow got into the hands of pirate smugglers. He'd be rescued by the Mandalorian Din Djarin, who adopted the child, and while Grogu had the chance to rejoin the Jedi Order with Luke, Grogu decided his place was as a Mandalorian apprentice and stayed with his adoptive father. While no longer a Jedi, Grogu retained his Force sensitivity and used his abilities to help Din's clan retake Mandalore. Asajj Ventress doesn't really count, but I think it helps to include her since she was once a Jedi. After losing faith in the Order, Ventress became a Sith assassin during the Clone Wars, but was soon redeemed after finding a new path as a bounty hunter. She developed a relationship with Jedi Quinlan Vos, but was soon killed by Count Dooku in an attempt to save Quinlan. However, before the Clone Wars ended, Ventress somehow returned and was brought back to life. She continued her career as a bounty hunter and even helped the rogue clone squad, Clone Force 99, when they were in need of information. Ventress's fate is unknown, but content including an explanation for her cheating death and a conclusion to her tale is already confirmed. Cal Kestis was a young Jedi who witnessed his master die during Order 66. 5 years later, he joined former Jedi Seer Junda in protecting the future of Force-sensitive children, and even survived an encounter with Darth Vader. Another 5 years later, he would become a rebel partisan and developed a relationship with Night Sister survivor Merrin, while uncovering a safe haven called Tanalorr for Jedi survivors. The two lovebirds' fates are currently unknown, but with the third Jedi game releasing in a few years, it's only inevitable. Caleb Dume, better known as Kanan Jarrus, also witnessed his Jedi Master die during Order 66. He escaped with help from Clone Sergeant Hunter of Clone Force 99 and spent 18 years leading the growing rebellion with his wife Hera. He would soon find a young street rat named Ezra Bridger and trained him to become a Jedi, and the two survived several encounters with Darth Vader, 4 Inquisitors, Darth Maul, and Grand Admiral Thrawn, but Kanan died in a self-sacrifice to save Hera and Ezra on Lothal. Luminara Unduli was a Jedi Master stationed on Kashyyyk before Order 66 took place. She was imprisoned and executed on Stygian Prime, but that's not where her story ends. Up to 15 years after Order 66, false rumors of her survival would be spread by the Empire to lure in and kill even more Jedi survivors on Stygian Prime. Not much is known about Dante and Amarr, but they were candidates for the Inquisitors early on in the Empire's formation. Amarr's insubordination led to his death by the Grand Inquisitor, and Dante was killed by Barriss Offee during the trials by order of the Grand Inquisitor to prove her worth. Oppo Rancisis was a Jedi Council member before the fall of the Order. His fate is unknown, but we do know they survived Order 66 thanks to this wanted list in the comics, which also lists 2 more Jedi, Kamun Koil and Selric Eluis, but we know next to nothing about them. Not much is known about Council member Coleman Cash's survival as well, but we do know he eventually died because his body was seen in the Inquisitorius tomb in Obi-Wan Kenobi. We also don't know anything about the humble Terra Sinube and how he escaped Order 66, but just like Coleman Cash, he was eventually tracked down and killed, since his body is also seen in the Inquisitorius tomb in Obi-Wan Kenobi. Jocasta Nu was the Jedi Temple librarian before Order 66 took place. She survived the 501st's assault on the temple, but returned less than a year later to recover temple records, where she was promptly killed by Darth Vader. Kirik Infilla was a Jedi who retired before Order 66 took place, but that didn't stop him from being hunted by Darth Vader. He was one of the first Jedi Vader killed in his robotic suit, and Kirik's lightsaber crystal was used to create Vader's very own lightsaber that he used throughout his reign. Zubain was a Zabrak Jedi created for the Star Wars mobile game Uprising. He and his friends found refuge at a Jedi shrine, but it was short-lived because the Inquisitors found and murdered all 4 of them. Farron Barr took refuge on Mon Cala around a year after Order 66, and was generally a scummy individual. He would mind trick people into helping them, but the Inquisitors and their platoon of clone purge troopers managed to keep up with him. Barr used the Force to control the purge troopers and have them turn on the Inquisitors, but that only helped for so long, and he was killed by Darth Vader shortly after. Gungi was a Wookiee Jedi youngling who was seen on numerous adventures with Ahsoka Tano during the Clone Wars. We don't know how he survived, but he was captured by slave traders about a year after Order 66. He was rescued by Clone Force 99, who helped take him back to his homeworld of Kashyyyk, and we aren't sure what happened after Gungi was reunited with his family, but considering Kashyyyk quickly became under Imperial occupation and enslaved most of the Wookiees, I can't say I have faith in Gungi's survival. This unnamed, unidentified Jedi fugitive was being hunted by Imperial Inquisitors around a year after the Jedi Purge. One of the Inquisitors, a conflicted Barriss Offee, saved the Jedi and promised to heal their wounds, but their fate is currently unknown. Quinlan Vos was an infamous Jedi Knight field agent before the fall of the Order, and while the details of his survival are vague, it's not surprising considering he's known for going undercover. His fate is unknown, but he survived at least a decade into the Empire's rule, helping Pathfinders relocate and smuggle Jedi survivors, so maybe he joined up with Ventress within that time. Eth Kos was a I can't say his fucking name. Eth Koth was a member of the Jedi Council for almost the entirety of the Clone Wars. Near the end of the war, he retired and settled on a desert world to become a pastor, but that wasn't enough to make him immune to Vader's hunt. It took 5 years to locate him, but he was killed by Vader defending the family he attempted to build after leaving the Jedi. Not much is known about Plaka Opus and the unnamed Zeltron, but they were hunted and killed by the 13th Sister from Rise of the Red Blade. Eno Cordova and his apprentice Cere Junda would have parted ways before Order 66, since Cordova had an infatuation with studying the culture of the mysterious Zeffo. Cere would lose her apprentice Trilla to the Inquisitors, but her failure to help her student didn't break her will. She eventually met Cal Kestis and even reunited with Cordova, and just like Quinlan Vos, they joined the Hidden Path. Unfortunately, they met a gruesome end when Bode Akuna, an Imperial mole, shot Cordova and alerted Darth Vader to their doorstep, who promptly killed Cere. Not much is known about Nari, but 10 years after Order 66, he would venture to Tatooine to receive help from Obi-Wan Kenobi. Kenobi refused, having his own mission to protect Luke, and warned Nari to simply hide, but Nari was later killed by the Inquisitors. Little is known about the survival of Mill and her initiate Stag. She knew Anakin Skywalker at a young age, and their survival of Order 66 is unknown, but apparently they lived into the era of the First Order, where they were seasoned bounty hunters. However, they were only mentioned and never shown. It's safe to assume they didn't retain their Force sensitivity and resorted to lying low. Nakmed was a Jedi who left the Order before they were eradicated. He retired with a family, but abandoned them to keep them safe after an encounter with the Grand Inquisitor. He lived as a recluse on the planet Pamba, where he lived out the rest of his days and died 28 years after the fall of the Empire. What a guy. Let's move on to the Inquisitors. They were made up of mostly former Jedi Knights that either joined the Empire willingly or were brainwashed into becoming hunters that would find and exterminate any remaining Jedi fugitives. The Grand Inquisitor was a former Jedi Temple guard who turned to the dark side for a number of reasons. He despised the Temple librarian Jocasta Nu, who denied him access to certain Temple records and failed to see his greatness, and his faith only faded further after Temple bombing occurred late into the Clone Wars. He was under Palpatine's control before Order 66 even begun, and while not confirmed, certain story group employees at Lucasfilm have hinted that the reason there weren't any Temple guards during Anakin's invasion of the Jedi Temple was because the Grand Inquisitor killed them all. He would be marked head of the Inquisitorius and aided in the hunt for Ahsoka Tano, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ezra Bridger, and Kanan Jarrus. However, the latter was his inevitable end aboard a doomed Star Destroyer. Trill Sidori was the apprentice of Cere Junda. After Order 66, she was captured and tortured into submission as the second sister, and despised her master for failing her. She would reunite with Cere 5 years later, where Cere profusely apologized for leaving her behind. Trilla was moved by the speech, but only killed by Darth Vader shortly afterward for showing compassion. Reva, later called the Third Sister, was a youngling at the time of Order 66. She witnessed Anakin's massacre and survived an encounter with him, causing a lust for revenge against the fallen Jedi. She would be discovered by the Inquisitors and taken into their ranks, only to take advantage of that opportunity so she can grow close to Darth Vader and take her revenge. She failed spectacularly, but survived yet again fueled by her anger, and after a pep talk by Obi-Wan Kenobi, relieved herself of her vengeful tendencies. Her fate is currently unknown. Lyn, later renamed the Fourth Sister, was given the opportunity to become an Imperial hunter after Order 66. She gave Barriss Offee, another fallen Jedi, the same opportunity, only for Barriss to have second thoughts and betray Lyn. The Fourth Sister survived the betrayal and would go on to pursue Obi-Wan Kenobi, and even have a rematch with the older Barriss. The rematch ended with Barriss fatally wounded, but getting through to Lyn and showing her there is a way out of the Inquisitor's rank. Lyn presumably deserted the Inquisitors to help Barriss, but her fate is unknown. The fifth brother's true name is currently unknown, but he seemingly joined the Inquisitors willingly after losing faith in the Jedi Order and the Galactic Senate. He had aspirations to become the new Grand Inquisitor and attempted to prove himself through hunting several Jedi, including Eth Koth, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Nari, Cal Kestis, Cere Junda, Kanan Jarrus, Ezra Bridger, and Ahsoka Tano, but he was ultimately killed by Darth Maul in search for a Sith artifact. Bill Valen, or the Sixth Brother, is one of the shortest living Inquisitors. He was killed 1 year into the Empire's rule by Ahsoka Tano when his lightsaber imploded. The most notable thing about his character is that the crystals from said exploded lightsaber were used to create Ahsoka's own white lightsaber crystals. Not much is known about the Seventh Sister's true identity, but she assisted the Fifth Brother in several hunts for Jedi fugitives, including Ahsoka, Kanan, and Ezra, and just like the Fifth Brother, died by the hands of Darth Maul. Once again, not much is known about the Eighth Brother's identity, but we do know he's a Torellian Django jumper, making him incredibly agile and swift. But the only notable mission we know he was on was the hunt for Darth Maul, causing him to plummet toward his death. We've gone through 3 Inquisitors in a row knowing nearly nothing about them, but we do know a lot about Masana Tide, or the Ninth Sister. She was a Jedi who was tortured into submission, just like Trilla, and was taught that once one has lost themselves through being brainwashed, losing something like a limb is trivial. It's a small moment for her character, but incredibly important once you consider that this is something every Inquisitor has gone through, regardless of whether they joined willingly or were forced into it. Masana arguably suffered the most when it came to sustaining physical injuries. She would lose an eye to Darth Vader as an example to all the Inquisitors, a leg to the Sixth Brother, who threw her under the bus so he could escape during a mission, an arm when pursuing Cal Kestis on Kashyyyk, and eventually her life rematching with Kestis again on Coruscant. Proset Dibs, or the 10th Brother, was a Jedi put on leave before Order 66 took place, a result of insubordination against Mace Windu when he began to lose faith in the Jedi Order. He was one of the first Inquisitors recruited, but was one of the first to die when his purge troopers were mind-tricked by Farron Barr. They opened fire and dispatched him almost immediately. Iskat Akaris and her friend Tualan were taken into the Inquisitorius, but in very different circumstances. Iskat was an incredibly aggressive Jedi Knight who caught the attention of Palpatine and was offered the chance to join willingly as the 13th sister. Tualan, however, was not so lucky. He was left for dead by Iskat and was later captured and tortured by the Inquisitors. We don't know Tualan's number, but since he joined the Inquisitors after Iskat, I'm going to assume that he was the 14th brother. Now on the same team, just on the dark side, Iskat and Tualan made amends and even formed an intimate relationship, but were killed by Vader when he learned of this. You may have noticed that I skipped some numbers there, but that's because we don't know who the 11th and 12th Inquisitors are. We do have 2 Inquisitors without numbers, Maruk and the unidentified Hunter from Tales of the Jedi, and we can't say for certain they were the 11th and 10th brothers, but it's not like we know any other Inquisitors to fit the slots, so we're going to have to roll with it. We know nothing about Maruk and the unnamed Hunter, other than the fact that they joined the Empire relatively early on. The unnamed one was killed by Ahsoka at some point, and Maruk, despite his story having nothing to go off of for 30 years, somehow outlived the Empire and joined Morgan Elsbeth to find Grand Admiral Thrawn. He was killed by Ahsoka, and it's implied that Morgan Elsbeth used Night Sister magic to enhance his body, whether it be physical strength, resurrecting him from the dead, or restoring his force sensitivity. Barriss Offee was a Jedi Padawan who lost faith in her order long before the rise of the Empire. She bombed the Jedi Temple and was imprisoned, but after the Inquisitors were formed, was given the chance to join their ranks. She regretted it immediately and became a rogue healer, helping Jedi fugitives and possibly aiding her old friend Ahsoka. She was eventually tracked down by the 4th sister and appears to have been fatally wounded, but Barriss got through to Lynn before her supposed death, and the two's fates are undetermined, so maybe Barriss somehow lived. Now let's move on to the niche category of Jedi who were not turned into Inquisitors, but did fall to the dark side on their own accord. Baylan Skoll was a Jedi Knight who lost faith in the Order and survived Order 66, but laid low for decades as a mercenary. He would outlive the Empire and mentor his own Padawan Shin Hati, training her to be something greater. Both would be hired by Morgan Elsbeth to help rescue Grand Admiral Thrawn from his exile. He believed the location of Thrawn's exile was housing a great power related to the Mortis gods, but his fate is currently unknown. Bode Akuna was a Jedi stationed with Republic intelligence and used his infiltration skills to remain hidden long enough to meet a wife named Tyla and have a daughter named Kata. At some point, Tyla was killed by the Inquisitors when they were pursuing Bode, and he made a deal with the Imperial Security Bureau to remain hidden if he was a mole to help find Jedi survivors. He'd form a close relationship with Cal Kestis, but that didn't stop him from betraying the hidden path, and eventually spiraled even further into the dark side, leading to Cal killing him. Malicos was a Jedi who survived Order 66 by hiding on Dathomir and taking control of the Knight Brothers. He'd groomed Night Sister Merrin into working for him, but Merrin and Cal Kestis eventually teamed up to defeat and bury him alive. His death isn't confirmed, but it's safe to assume that he perished. Dagan Gera was a Jedi of the ancient High Republic era who spent his life finding the lost world Tanalorr. But after the Order told him to abandon the planet due to a crisis, he went rogue and resulted in being mutilated by his friend Kree. The Jedi put him in a stasis tank so he could heal at a Kobo outpost, but the outpost was forced to be abandoned and Dagan was forgotten for nearly 200 years. Cal Kestis would uncover him after Order 66, and as expected, Dagan went rogue and tried to find Tanalorr again, but Cal Kestis killed him. And that's everyone. If I missed any Jedi, feel free to let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And may the Force be with you.